Hello, everybody. Welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. It is November 6, 2013, coming to you live this Wednesday afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern. And if you're watching us on MPTS or if you're watching us online, glad to have you with us. And we do have a great guest with us here today who we'll get to in a moment. I do have a quick programming note for everybody. A little bit of an announcement. Some of you may have seen something online. I'm actually getting a little text update about this. Of course, as some of you probably know, there are two versions of this program. There's the television edition that we do here every Wednesday, and there's also the radio edition, which runs on IPMNation.com, and that one obviously is just audio, hence the radio edition. A couple of months ago, we put the radio edition on hiatus, and we've just been focused on the TV edition. The reason for that is the radio edition is actually returning, and we kind of had a little bit of a hiatus to prepare for the new version of the radio edition. If you watched the show, last week's show, you might have seen toward the end of the show, Dr. Kevin called in, and viewers and listeners of IPMNation.com might be familiar with Dr. Kevin. He's had a couple of different programs that have run on IPMNation.com, and he's been a guest on this show as well as Norm and Friends, and so he's probably familiar to some of you. But drkevinradionetwork.com, that's the website where you will be able to hear the new version of Matt Connarton Unleashed, the new radio edition. And I just received a text from Dr. Kevin, because I haven't really talked about this on the show before. But the first live show will be, and I want to make sure I have the date right, will be November 21st. So what's going to happen is on November 21st, which is Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Dr. Kevin Radio Network, will be the debut of the Matt Connarton Show, which will be similar to Unleashed, but kind of a more laid-back version of this program. It won't be necessarily political. And then on Tuesday, the following Tuesday, will be the debut of the new radio edition of Matt Connarton Unleashed at 9 p.m. Eastern. So that would be Tuesday, November 26th at 9 p.m. So basically, if you tune into Dr. Kevin Radio on Tuesday nights and Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, you'll be able to hear me. Unleashed, the new radio edition, Tuesday nights at 9, and the Matt Connarton Show, Thursday nights at 9, and I hope I explained that clearly enough for everybody. But go to drkevinradionetwork.com. It goes live this coming Sunday, and you'll be able to see who else is going to be on the show, on the network rather. Obviously, Dr. Kevin will have his own show on there, and some other great hosts. It's really I think a really great team that Dr. Kevin has put together for the new radio network, and I'm very honored and very grateful to him for giving me not one but two slots on drkevinradionetwork.com. So check that out. Like us on Facebook, very easy to find. Just type in Dr. Kevin Radio Network and you'll find it, and you can keep up on everything that's happening. There's going to be new shows added consistently, and of course, if you go to IPMNation.com, we'll have links up to everything there too. So really, really excited, and I'll mention that at the end of the show again too, to just kind of remind everybody. But anyway, so that's the big news. The radio edition of Matt Connarton Unleashed will be returning shortly at a brand new venue, but you'll still be able to get it on IPMNation.com as well. We'll have a link to it and all that. So, without further ado, our very special guest today, running for United States Congress, Gary Lambert. How are you, sir?
Fine, Matt. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're here. It's good to talk to you again. Of course, you were on Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. What was that, a couple of months ago?
I want to say about a month and a half ago, somewhere around there. It was before I was an official candidate, I believe.
Okay.
Oh, no, wait. I'm sorry. I was a candidate then. Yeah.
Okay. And we were kind of talking off air. You don't have a primary challenger yet.
Not yet. There'll always be someone. I assume no one will let me run alone for the entire race. But no, I don't have anybody yet, Matt. And it's a good feeling. I'm out there, talking to all the Republicans I can, all the groups I can, and gathering as much support as I can.
And you'll be running against, assuming you win the nomination, you'll be running against Ann Custer,
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And where are you from?
I am from, originally, a place called Hope, Rhode Island.
Okay.
But I live in Nashua now and have for, about 19 years. Like I tell people, I came up here on a blind date 20 years ago. I met my wife.
Yeah.
And that's the story.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
So Bill Clinton isn't the only man from Hope.
No, that's right.
You're just from a
there is
different
actually a Hope, Rhode Island. It sounds to me, I've never been to Hope, Arkansas, but it sounds like it was very similar. It was a mill town, just a very middle class community in the northwestern part of the state of Rhode Island, and kind of a rural community as well.
Yeah.
I had, a dairy farm outside my door, and it was
Oh,
nice.
really? Yeah. As a Republican, do you feel more at home in New Hampshire?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
It's just
Rhode Island's a pretty liberal state.
it is a lot of Democrats, of course, and tends to be a liberal state, and unfortunately, a state that really is not able to manage its finances too well. We had, one town at least go bankrupt, and I don't know, there's some other
I didn't
towns
know
in
that,
trouble.
really?
Yep. My mother lives in Cranston right now, and I know they're having a lot of difficulty as well. And that's what happens when you spend too much and you spend more money than you have.
Very high unemployment there, isn't there?
Very high, one of the highest in the country.
Yeah. Wow, brutal. I want to, and I do have some specific policy questions for you, but I'd want to get to know your history a little bit more. Now, you're a military man.
Yep.
And tell me about that. Tell me about your
Well,
military
I
career.
joined the Marine Corps when I was 19 years old.
Okay, so right out of high school?
No, actually, I was just started my sophomore year of college.
Oh, okay.
And I joined what's called the Platoon Leaders Class program in the Marine Corps. It's a unique program amongst the military services, which is essentially you go down to Officer Candidate School in the summers between your sophomore and junior year, and then junior and senior year. The Marine Corps sees if they want you, and you see if you want the Marine Corps. And then at the time that you graduate, when you do graduate from college, you make a decision as to whether or not you want to accept the commission.
Okay.
So I signed up when I was 19. I never knew 34 years later I would still be in.
Yeah.
But I am.
Yeah.
But I'm retiring next year after 35 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're still a full-time Marine? Or?
I am I'm in the reserve.
Okay.
So what that means is my unit is at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina.
Okay.
I serve with the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force down at Camp Lejeune. And I normally go down there about once a month to do what we call drills.
Yeah.
And it's a part-time job, I guess.
Sure.
But it has been a full-time job. After 9/11, I was activated twice
Okay.
to mobilize to active duty. And I was also mobilized after during the Desert Storm, Desert Shield.
Okay.
And I was on active duty originally from 1984 when I got out of law school to 1987.
Okay. Did you go overseas when you were activated? Or?
Oh, yeah. Yep. I was in Iraq.
Okay.
And I served in Iraq as the number 2 lawyer in Iraq, number 2 military lawyer in Iraq.
Okay.
And it was, I could tell people, one of the best jobs I've had. I got there just as we had given the country back to the Iraqis.
Yeah.
And our job was to put a country together.
Yeah.
Which you don't get a chance to do that too many times. And I really enjoyed my time.
Nation building, people call it, yeah.
But we helped those folks, understand, what the Constitution was about and democracy. And it may not be pretty all the time, but they do have elections there.
Yeah.
And, they're moving in the right direction. Eventually, they will do very well. But you got to understand, for years and years and years, they were under that, the regime of Saddam Hussein, living with a dictator for generations, and some knew nothing else. And so democracy is a brand new thing for a lot of people there.
Yeah, it's interesting to talk with someone who not only served there, but was so involved in the process of the nation building, as it's often called. So you obviously feel very positively about that.
I do. I feel positive about helping a country. I know a lot of people don't think we belong in a lot of places, and there are some places I don't think we belong.
Yeah.
But eventually Saddam Hussein had to go, or something would have happened. The man was a bad actor. I could go on with the horror stories of all the things that he did and his sons did. But the country is better off, even though they are experiencing some difficulties.
Okay, so you're not necessarily a non-interventionist.
No, I think, but it has to have national security interests. That has to be at the forefront. That has to be the main reason, and at times the only reason why we should go.
Sure.
And I do think there were national security interests at the time for Iraq, given what we knew. But for example, take Syria, for example. I was very opposed to any involvement there because I did not see any national security interests involved.
I think last time we talked,
That's right.
that was kind of the front burner issue at the time, yeah.
Yep. So, and lobbing a bunch of missiles and rockets into a country is not a strategy in my mind, and I was very disappointed that the president and the administration had thought about that, and that's what they were going to do, because I didn't see any good coming out of that at all.
Mm-hmm. So you have you held public office before?
Yes,
Okay.
I got involved in politics for the very first time in my life in the 2010 election cycle.
Okay.
I ran for state senate in Nashua, District 13. I ran, talk about no primary, I never had a primary in that race
Really?
as well.
Yeah.
For good reason. There had not been a Republican elected to that office in 94 years before I ran. I did not know that. I knew it was bad. I remember one of the prominent Republicans in town, when I talked about running, he says, well, I can't promise you you're going to lose. And we ran a good campaign. We worked very hard. I had a great team. Knocked on every door that voted.
Sure.
And walked every street. And it worked out.
Yeah. What is it? I mean, obviously you put in the work, but what is it about you that? I mean, there has to be something else about you that appealed to these people to be the first Republican, and you said 94
Right.
years.
94
I mean,
years.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I tell you how I did it. I was just watching Chris Christie last night, and I just saw we have a lot of differences, but what we do have in common. He's just the kind of guy that people trust. And that's what I wanted people to do for me. I mean, that's what I tried to get people's trust.
Yeah.
And I said, this is what I've done. I've served my country for, at that point, was over 30 years. So I've served my country. This is who I am. You either like me or you don't, but I am who I am. You won't have any doubts about what I will do and who I am.
Right.
And I got people to like me and to trust me and to
Yeah.
believe in me. And the issues were actually secondary, I think, in that race. It was a state senate race. Let's face it, not to lessen the impact on that, but not a lot of people pay attention to state senate or state rep races. But I remember knocking on a lot of doors, and there were a lot of Democrats in that city. It's a very Democratic type of city.
Yeah.
People would say, Democrat or Republican? And I'd say, I'm a Marine, and I'm running for state senate. Can I talk to you about what's important to you? And so that would open up the door and break the ice. Because if you said Republican and it was a Democratic House, sometimes you get the door shut in your face.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And my wife, who was a great campaigner with me, that was the only thing that she just begged me not to do anymore was go door to door, because
really?
she did not like getting doors shut in her face.
Yeah.
And we had a few of those.
Sure.
And that was just. But other than that, she was an asset to me, and will be an asset in this race as well.
Well, it's interesting. It seems like, so in your experience, who you are, and your willingness to shoot straight with people and to really say, this is who I am, and I'm not going to BS you. That kind of overcomes partisanship. It sounds like
It does. It actually does. And I could go on and on. We don't have all day or all afternoon to talk about what I did up at the State House, but I'll give you like one example. Right to work.
Yeah.
I voted for right to work. I believe right to work is the right thing, but I got to tell you, I spent countless hours going to union meetings. If I got invited, I went.
Yeah.
I spent the morning with UPS, watching them load up the trucks and talking to the union members there. That's a full union shop.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to know what they thought about right to work and what they thought about their union and how their union helped them. And I got to tell you, I had some hot, heated, contentious meetings.
Yeah.
Where I was the only guy in the room, that was for right to work, and everybody else was adamant against it. But I thought it was right for the district as a whole, because as much as my father was a union member as well, as much as I love unions and what they have done and what they are still doing, we disagreed on that very issue there. But I listened, and I
Sure.
will continue to listen on any issue that comes before me.
Sure. Now, why do you want to challenge Ann Custer? What is driving you to want to take this step?
Well, I hope the main reason, I hope the reason anyone runs is they think they can do a better job than the person there.
Sure.
So I watched Annie Custer since she took over, and I've just been very disappointed. I've been very disappointed in her, like I've been very disappointed in the administration. And it started out, I started to come to the forefront pretty quickly on this because of her failure to pay her taxes on time for 3 years, her property taxes. That, I think, is just an abomination. If you're going to run for public office, number one, you ought to do a self-disclosure. I mean, I've made mistakes before, too. I've always paid my property taxes on time, but I made mistakes. So what do? You apologize for them. It's like the current thing with Obamacare. I mean, if President Obama only came out and said, you know what, probably shouldn't have said what I said about you getting to keep the insurance plan you want.
Right.
Still doesn't want to admit it. I was just listening to Secretary Sebelius on the radio on the way up here. Same thing. Don't these people get it that America doesn't mind an apology? America doesn't mind if you tell them you've done something wrong. You made a mistake.
Yeah.
But what they hate is when you lie to them and when you lose their trust.
Absolutely.
And so I think, that started off with Annie for me with the revelation that she didn't pay her taxes and the cavalier nature about them. And then I've been watching her for a whole time down there, and of course it's been about almost coming up on a year. And what has she done? I mean, what has she done for the middle class? What has she done for veterans? I mean, pick a group.
Yeah.
And I just don't see a lot of action out of her. And I tend to be an action type of guy. So I think I can do a better job, and that's why I'm running.
Does it, as a military man, does it ever bother you or frustrate you when you see, and this is almost more of a philosophical question than a political one in some ways, but when you see the U.S. Congress voting on and debating on matters of foreign policy, and you see folks who've, never put on a uniform, voting and speaking about sending our brave men and women to fight somewhere without any skin in the game of their own, without ever having served or without having any family members who have served. Do you ever feel like it's a little too easy for some of these people? And I'm not saying that people who have never been in the military shouldn't serve in our government. I'm not saying that at all. But I wonder sometimes when I see folks who've never been in that position, it almost seems too easy in a way for them to just say, well, yeah, I think we should do this, we should do that. Because they're not affected directly. They can make these decisions. The President Obama, he can. And I have mixed feelings about him. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm an independent. There's things I like about him and things I don't. But when I see someone who has never served a day in their life in the military, making these decisions about what our military should be doing and putting people in harm's way. Sometimes I get uncomfortable with it, and I'm wondering if, as a military man, if it ever makes you uncomfortable watching this go on.
It does to an extent, and I'm going to tell you why. The military is one of those entities, in my experience of experiencing a lot of different entities and organizations, it's got an entirely different culture, has almost an entirely different language, that if you're not part of that for some period of time, I don't know how you really fully understand it, So, I personally think everyone that runs for elected office should serve in the military. I think that it's an honorable cause. Only because, look, you've got to show someone that you care about your country and want to serve your country. And what better way than the military, or the Peace Corps for that matter, something like that. But yeah, a lot of those folks just jump in. Like take Annie Custer for example. I mean, no public service to speak of before she ran.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, boom, she ran and she's in there. And I wonder if she really understands the real needs of the military and how the military works.
Yeah.
And I think you got to do that. You're right, to take a vote on going to war. I mean, it's a big call, and yeah, you got to know the vocabulary, so to speak.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you take on a position, I mean, it's settled law now, but on something like ending Don't Ask, Don't Tell? I mean, how do you feel about that? Are you okay with it?
Yeah, I think it was a time had come for that.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, everybody should be treated equally.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I joined the Marine Corps when I remember the time when we discharged homosexuals,
Sure.
and that, which was wrong. And then I think it's finally coming around where nobody really cares.
Right. I
mean,
agree. Yeah.
It's the same thing in my business. I run a small law firm. I don't care who you are, but you got to be able to do the job. And I
Right.
want people to do the job. And that's what the military is about, too. The Marine Corps, especially, what we're about is we're about winning battles. So we don't care, who you are, what color skin you are, what sexual persuasion you are. Can you win battles? Will you be a warrior? And can you follow orders? Can
Right.
you lead?
Right.
That's what we're looking for in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I completely agree,
Yeah.
and I'm glad to hear you say that. It's like Barry Goldwater said, you don't have to be straight to shoot straight.
That's right. Exactly.
And he was obviously a very conservative guy. What about now? If you were serving in Congress right now, you would have to be voting on the Employee Non-Discrimination Act. I mean, just making sure I got the Got that right? Yeah.
Yep.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm a fan of it. I'm for it. I have not seen the bill that's coming out of the Senate yet, and I think they're going to vote on that this week.
Yeah.
But I'm inclined to be in favor of it.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm going to wait to see what the final wording is because the devil is in the details sometimes.
Sure.
But I think it's a good piece of legislation. I believe we have that in the state already. So.
I don't think this state does.
I thought,
or do we have a version of it?
I think we have a slight.
You'd know better than I do.
Yeah,
but
I think we do.
Okay.
And I support that as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's. Why not?
Yeah.
Who doesn't? Who wants to discriminate?
Right.
If they do, I want to make sure we find those people because there's no time for that. We don't have time for that right now.
Right. How do you feel about the current state of the Republican Party nationally? I mean, these you've got these Tea Partiers who've made quite a bit of trouble, and you don't. I mean, from what I've heard from you so far, you don't strike me as a Tea Partier. You seem very reasonable. Your typical Tea Partier isn't going to come out in favor of the ENDA, for example. From what I've seen, they tend to be very extreme right wing. And I mean, how do you feel about the direction that the party is going? And if you are elected to Congress, you're going to be serving alongside, although maybe not. A lot of them might be gone in that election cycle, but you're going to be serving alongside some of these people who are very unpopular and have kind of dragged down, from my vantage point, have really kind of dragged down your party in some ways in terms of perception. I mean, how do you feel about all that?
Well, look, I think everybody comes to the Republican Party, I hope, with, a skill set and some positives, maybe some negatives.
Right.
I want us all to join together. I think the Republican Party, and we have a lot of offshoots, we have a lot of splinter groups, but the Republican Party as a whole stands for less government, less spending, living within our means, balanced budget, and that's what everybody that I know, my friends, that's what they stand by in their home.
Sure.
I mean, nobody should be spending more than they got. Nobody should be racking up a credit card debt, and this debt we've got, the $17 trillion debt. I want everybody in the Republican Party to join together to bring that down.
Yeah.
And so I really don't care what you want to call yourself. I mean, like I told people before, I'm running on 4 labels. I mean, I'm a Marine, I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I'm a Republican. So those are the labels I'm running under.
Yeah. How would you have voted for, well, this will come up again because if you're elected, because I think we're in this pattern now where this is going to keep coming up. I know Mitch McConnell introduced something in the Senate to try to prevent that, but I'm not sure how that affects the House. The debt ceiling issue. Mm-hmm. I get very nervous when that comes up because I think defaulting is a terrible idea, and I think most economists agree. I mean, how do you feel about that? Because you may have to vote on that in the future.
Yeah, well, and I don't know in what context it will come up, and I don't know if it's going to come up the same time every way. But let me just tell you my basic feelings on this is there has to be negotiation and compromise down in Washington D.C. Right. We're not getting that now, okay?
Yeah.
And all I know, and I'm not taking sides, even though I was a Republican. I am a Republican. But you take a look at the last so-called crisis we had. Who was the party that was trying to negotiate and compromise? And who were the people that blatantly came out and said, nope, we're not going to compromise and we're not going to negotiate? That was President Obama and Harry Reid. Mm-hmm. Now, those words should not be uttered by an elected official, okay? So they should go. It's time for them to go. When you say those words to me, that means you're not governing. You have to go. Democracy functions on negotiation and compromise. So I'm willing to do negotiation and compromise when I get there, but the other side better be able to too.
Right.
So,
but if you come to a point where, and I've been critical of Obama on this because I think that I've really been critical of both sides, but my criticism of Obama was, it seems to me, and you may be able to clarify. I keep wondering if there's something I'm missing here. He could have said, I will, if Congress doesn't act on this, I will invoke the 14th Amendment, and we'll be okay. Mm-hmm. Because in theory, even though it's never been done in the history of the country, in theory, he has that right. I guess it would be through executive order to say, well, we're going to pay our debts no matter what. That may be challenged and have to go to the Supreme Court. I don't know, but I think there's blame to go around, and I think the game that they were playing, and this is what frustrates me is these political games that are played with something as important as the full faith and credit of the United States, of the United States government, is I think what the game they were playing is, well, if we lay back, we can let the Republicans sort of self-destruct. You've got these folks like Ted Cruz and some of these other Tea Partiers, Ted Cruz in the Senate and a lot of Tea Partiers in the House. And, they're going to take the hit for this because they're going to have to cave. And politically, again, I'm not saying it was right for them to play that game, because I don't like seeing these games played with this stuff. This is serious stuff. But I think politically their calculation was correct. If you look at polls, it seems like the Republican Party does get the brunt of the blame. But when it comes down to it, I mean, do you agree that default is not an option?
Yeah. First of all, yes, we got to keep the government running, and we can't default on our bills. But the thing is, though, Matt, I mean, I can see the frustration. I'm not even down there, but I can see the frustration from my Republican colleagues down there, which is, come on, when are we finally going to deal? When are we going to get the debt down? So it doesn't. I mean, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to be as objective about this as I can, but I don't see the Democrats coming up to the table to say, okay, let's talk. Like right now, there's no crisis going on. Is there anything going on with the budget? Are we trying to work anything out? If they are, I haven't heard about it.
Yeah, right now it's all about the website.
It's about Obamacare now.
Yeah.
So it's like the soup du jour down there.
Yeah.
Look, I can't run my business on a soup du jour. So how we're not running the government. That's clearly what's going on. We're living by crisis to crisis to crisis. So look, when I see parties coming together, then it might be working. But I guess I don't blame my Republican colleagues to say, can you get our attention now? Can we get your attention? And this is how we're going to get your attention.
Right.
And something's got to be done about the debt, and nothing's being done about it.
Right. What do we do about Obamacare? And the reason I phrase the question this way is I know that I hear, and I saw it in some of your literature online. You want to repeal it, obviously, but is there something to replace it with? Because it seems to me, I have a lot of mixed feelings about this, and I'm as an independent, on the one hand, I agree. At the start of all this, I agreed with the basic liberal principle, which at one time I think was also a conservative principle, until it became sort of politically untenable for conservatives to stick by this. The idea that every American should have access to affordable, adequate, more than adequate health care. I mean, I think the idea that in the most prosperous, most innovative country in the world that we can't make that happen, I think that's unacceptable. But on the other hand, I think Obamacare was the wrong way to do it. I would have preferred, as an independent and a centrist, my frustration with this whole thing has been, I would have preferred a more sort of Republican-style version of healthcare reform. I think healthcare reform is necessary, but I would have preferred something that was more market-based, where you remove some of the barriers. I think you should be able to go online and buy health insurance across state lines, and almost like shopping for car insurance. You should be able to do that and open up the markets, instead of doing what Obamacare does and what the Democrats decided to do, which is, well, let's create more bureaucracy. Let's add more layers of bureaucracy to an already overly bureaucratized system. So I'm critical of the Democrats for that. But on the other hand, I'm also critical of the Republicans, because I feel like at the national level, the only time Republicans are interested in discussing healthcare reform and saying, oh, well, we have our own ideas, is when they have something to push back against. When you've got the Democrats pushing for Obamacare, all of a sudden you hear Republicans saying, well, we have our own ideas. Why don't you listen to us? Hillary Care, back during the Clinton administration, when Hillary took that on, and she didn't get very far with it. She had to give up relatively quickly, actually, from what I recall. But we heard it at that time, too. We heard Republicans all of a sudden pushing back, which is part of why she had to give up. So it seems like Republicans will say, well, we have our own ideas, but then they get very quiet when there's nothing to push back against. And I used to laugh during the 2012 campaign, when I would hear Mitt Romney say repeatedly at the podium, he would say, on day one, I will repeal and replace Obamacare. And I would laugh out loud because, number one, no, you're not going to, how are you going to repeal it on day one? You're going to sign an executive order just repealing it? I don't know if you can do that. Number two, replace it with what? And my question for you is, I mean, do you have any ideas on that? What would you, in a perfect world, if you can repeal it, which I mean, you know, at this point, good luck. But if you can repeal it, what do you replace it with? Or do you replace it with anything? Or do we go back to the status quo?
Well, here's how, and it may be nirvana, but, you know, hey, I'm going to try to get there, I guess.
Yeah.
If everybody was doing better and everybody had a job and everybody could afford it, then everybody probably would have health care. Okay,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of people struggling out there that can barely make ends meet.
Right.
I got to tell you, this Obamacare doesn't help them at all because they've either got to pay the penalty or pay this for this increased insurance now. But I think if the economy was better, I mean, I just know, look, when I started my law firm in 1989, I struggled, okay? I don't even want to tell you how little I made my first year because, I just left the firm and I started my own.
Yeah.
I took out a catastrophic plan. And I knew I had enough money in the bank that if I had to really have a major operation or I had to go to the hospital, I had that money. But man, I'm not sure I could have made it with a really an expensive healthcare plan like they're forcing upon me, like forcing maternity coverage upon me when I was a single guy at 29.
Yeah.
I understand the risk pool. I understand the burden that everybody has to share. But I tell you what, in this tough economy, to create a healthcare plan that purposely doesn't want you to work a full-time job, wants you to work a part-time job, encourages employers to give you a part-time job. Are you kidding me? We're going it's not even like we're treading water. We're going in the opposite direction with Obamacare. So my plan is, there's certain things that we probably can agree on, like no pre-existing conditions.
Right. I mean, that's probably the most popular part of the whole thing.
Who have I found anybody yet that doesn't want that? Right. So let's get that. Who says we can't pass a law for that and then another law for another thing? But this so-called comprehensive health care has just been a disaster.
Would you repeal the whole thing? Would you just try to repeal the mandates?
No, you got to start from scratch. This thing is a mess, and it's not just me. It's Democrats saying that now. This thing is an utter nightmare on multiple levels, from the website on. The unions don't like it.
Yeah.
It's destroying the 40-hour work week according to the unions. Look, let's just start from scratch. Let's get together. Maybe we can have a Republican actually vote for a plan that a Republican and a Democrat can agree on.
Yeah.
Because in this case right here, not one single Republican voted for it.
Right. I think that was the giant miscalculation. If Obama had said, if from the beginning the idea had been let's do something that, because some of this originated with the Heritage Foundation, obviously, which is very conservative. If Obama had said, let's take what the Heritage Foundation proposes, and let's kind of expand on that without the added bureaucracy, without the thing that I don't get about the mandate is if the penalty is, what is it, $94 is the penalty, I think, if you don't enroll in anything.
And who you are and your age, I think.
Yeah, I don't understand what is to stop anyone who doesn't, what's the term? We call them the invincibles, the 20-year-olds who think they're never going to get sick or whatever. What's to stop them from saying, well, I'll just go ahead and pay the $94 if I don't think I need this, because there's not a health care plan that exists that's not going to be cheaper than that. You got to pay $94 once a year on your taxes. What's to stop any of them from just saying, well, I'll just pay the fine or the tax,
Matt,
or whatever? That's what I don't get about.
You hit the nail right on the head. As far as I know, I don't know if this is still going on, but when the website first opened, as I recall, the number one query, the number one question by people were, how do I avoid this thing?
Right.
So I mean, can you imagine that? What kind of a health plan have you got when people are looking to avoid the health care plan?
Right.
So they're looking to get out and making sure. But you know what? One of the things that's got to end down in D.C. is this. What's good for me is not good for you, and what's good for this has got to stop.
Yeah.
And why? Congress, is carving out exceptions for themselves, giving themselves the gold plan, giving themselves the subsidies.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You've got to be kidding me. How can you look voters in the eye with a straight face and do that?
Right.
So, That's the number one problem. Everybody's got to be equal here. Mm-hmm. President Obama needs to be on Obamacare. His family needs to be on Obamacare. Just the way, as the folks down in Nashua that are signing up to get on are going to be on.
Yeah. Well, what are your constituents telling you? I mean, are you hearing kind of a unified message, or is there some split? Because you're obviously in a area where there's a lot of Democrats.
Right.
I mean, are you hearing a lot of just sort of universal discouragement, or?
Yeah, I'm hearing what you see on national TV and what you hear on the radio and what you see expressed down in Congress at the hearings, which is this is not working out. People can't sign up. It's cutting into the 40-hour work week. The list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
So, folks are saying the same thing everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. What are some of the other issues that you're concerned with that you want to tackle when you get there if you're elected?
Jobs in the economy. I understand that's always been at the forefront for most voters and in their minds. I don't know if you've heard recently in some of the recent polling I've seen, and it's very discouraging, is that the number one issue on voters' minds now is the dysfunction in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. So that's always been my number one issue, which is, that's why I'm going down there. I believe the place, they've taken over the zoo and the and the animals are running the zoo.
Right.
So I'm going down there, of course, to stop the dysfunction because I'm not used to dysfunction, not in the Marine Corps, not in my law firm.
Yeah.
I'm used to leading, I'm used to following, and I'm used to working as a team and accomplishing a mission. So that's what I'm going down there to do. But after that, hey, it's always about the jobs in the economy. If people can't get jobs or people are underemployed, mm-hmm. and can't find full-time work, until we get that fixed or help that from where it's at right now, everything else is going to take a back seat.
What do we do? What do you have in mind?
Oh, I go to any business, any major business, and ask them what is the number one problem with government. And it's that government's in their way. Mm-hmm. Overbearing regulations. Numerous regulations. They got to hire people to read the regulations. Now, look, there's a time and place for regs. We get that. I mean, you can't be dumping trash into the Nashua River.
Right.
If you do, I'm coming after you, number one. And yeah, it's a violation of a law, probably an EPA law.
Sure, environmental regulations, safety regulations. Yeah,
I get them. But when you just make regulations for the sake of making them, which kind of looks like what's happening right now. Look, bureaucracy is that way.
Decades, yeah.
People are sitting in Washington, D.C., they're getting paid. What are they supposed to do? Come up with more regs. Mm-hmm. How are you going to get a promotion? How are you going to say you did anything? By taking regs away?
Exactly. Because when it's time for these folks to run for re-election, that's kind of it's resume building, really. It's right. when you see these campaign ads, it's I did this, I helped pass this law, I sponsored this law, I did this. Look at all this great stuff I did.
Right. And sometimes less laws is better. One of the things that I'm most proudest of when I was up in the State House, and I didn't prime sponsor a lot of bills, but one of them I did was a Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Day. Yeah. No one had ever done that. It's been done in other states. Not once have we had a state proclamation to say, Vietnam veterans, we are welcoming you home. And we did that. We must have had 3,000 to 4,000 people show up at the Armory, the National Guard hangar up in Concord. And that's the kind of thing government should be doing. Just do not get, in other words, it's honoring our veterans, honoring those who work hard, but this getting in the way of business.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to your initial question. That's what you do. And by doing that, you will let employers create more jobs. We will have higher employment. We will have more prosperity. Everybody moves up the economic ladder, we hope, and we should be giving everybody the opportunity to move up. Nobody should be stuck on food stamps. Nobody should be stuck on welfare, because and nobody should be helping people to get stuck on them. It's the time and place for help. We should be giving people help,
sure.
But we should also have an education program to show how to get off them. That's the whole goal.
Right. Welfare to workfare, I think, is the phrase that we used to hear. I haven't heard that lately.
We can come up with whatever phrase you want, as long as we're doing something.
Right.
It's about getting the job done, and I'm sick and tired of people not getting the job done down there.
Right. Speaking of, obviously, you're very concerned about veterans affairs and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Something I kind of went off on a little bit of a tirade on last week's show about. I don't know if you saw this on the news. This goes back a few months, but it's something that's really stuck with me. There are folks coming home from Iraq, Afghanistan, mm-hmm. and what have you, who need services and can't get them in a timely fashion. Sometimes having to wait more than a year or longer because there's a building in D.C. where these files, and it sounds funny to be talking about it this way in 2013, but these paper files are in this giant room in a building. You might know what building it's in. I don't remember. But there's this giant room with all these paper files, and each file is for a veteran who has come home, who's applied for whatever services they need. And part of the backlog is, this room there's files on shelves, there's files in file cabinets, and there's files that are just stacked. There's these enormous stacks of paper on the floor in this big room. And according to the news story I saw, it's gotten to a point where they've had to reinforce the floor because the weight of all that paper is so heavy that it could collapse. And that's representative of how backed up they are. Something that I never hear anyone talk about, and the only major candidate for office I've ever heard discuss this consistently is Newt Gingrich, who I'm not a conservative, and he is, so I disagree with him on a lot of things, but I give him a lot of credit for this. He's the only one I've ever heard discuss about the need to modernize the government because it's ridiculous that this kind of situation exists where in the year 2013, where we have all this technology, we have our smartphones, we have our iPads, and all this stuff. And yet, veterans, who should be an absolute top priority, as I'm sure you agree, can't get the help they need because for some reason, even with all our technology, the one thing that we don't do is modernize our government. All those paper files, those should be, in a computer system somewhere,
Backed up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I feel like, the conversation, because of the left-right paradigm in this country, when you take any issue, it ends up being this sort of hyper-simplified two-choice binary thing where, so you can either expand government and spend money, or you can cut government and save money, but that doesn't apply to everything. And I think this is an example of an issue where, well, how about a third option? How about we spend some money to modernize our government so this type of thing doesn't happen? And that's not a conservative or a liberal idea. That's just, to me, just a common sense, logical solution. We need to start modernizing this stuff. Obviously, we can't trust the Obama administration to do that because look at what has happened to the Affordable Care Act website. But we need to figure out a way to do that. I mean, how do you feel about that? Is that something that you would work toward, some sort of modernization so that this kind of thing doesn't happen to our veterans? Because it breaks my heart to see that.
Yeah, it does. And I tell you what's got to happen. Look, and I don't mean, I state the obvious in this. Government is good at doing certain things, and there's some things it's just pure bad at, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
Which is, let FedEx come in, or let UPS come in, or let private enterprise. I mean, what company, Flowers or Us, Pro Flowers or whatever, they could put up a website. Everything works, but the government can't seem to do that. And I'm going to tell you why. At all these companies, there's a leader. Someone's in charge.
Right.
Someone's taking responsibility. Someone will be fired. Someone may be hired. In government, once you got that job, you got it. So why improve? So, we've done it, Johnny, we've done it this way for 20 years. So why, my retirement's coming up here soon. Why change?
Yeah, and there's an inertia that sets in.
And so that's what's going on. Government cannot do that well.
Yeah.
It just can't.
Yeah.
Because of the bureaucracy and the lack of accountability.
Yeah. So something like the situation that I just described, you would outsource that.
Either that,
have a company
first of all, you go in and start firing people. That's the quickest way probably to get things done.
Right.
And I've had to do it as an employer.
Sure.
It's the quickest way to change everything right away, right, instantly.
Yeah.
If that, I'm not saying that's got to be done. That might have to be done. But then, bring in outside. There's plenty of businesses that want to pair with the government to help government out. We've got industry constantly engaging with us. So bring somebody in, probably at no charge.
Right.
What can we do here? What software program can we come up with to help veterans to move this thing along?
Right, exactly.
There's got to be plenty of opportunities to do that.
Yeah. So is that something you would tackle? Would you, if you're elected, will you put a bill on the table to do something like that?
I will put
because I don't hear anybody talking about this stuff. It drives me nuts.
You know why? They're too busy with the soup du jour. And you've got to focus on certain things. I mean, it sounds like it's AD. Everybody's running around with attention deficit disorder down there. I mean, it's like, what are we on today? What are we talking about today?
Right.
You can't lose track of the veterans. You're absolutely right. That's a key priority.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I understand we're a war-weary nation. right now. We've been at war for a long time. Iraq, Afghanistan, I get it. I was there and all that. But we've got to take care of these vets, and that's the number one thing. And so, yep, I don't know what the bill's going to look like, Matt.
Yeah.
But I'm coming up with a bill to modernize at least the VA to get something quicker through than it's going through right now.
Yeah, excellent. That's good to hear. We have a little bit of time left. Do you have a position on NSA and spying
Yeah, I do.
and all that?
Yeah, I do. I got a position on it. My position is this: like any governmental agency, they do some things good. Well, most governmental agencies do some things good. And NSA, when it's working right and there's a right balance, does some wonderful things.
Yeah.
But like any governmental agency, here we go again, without leadership and without oversight. And that's what's happened with NSA and a lot of organizations. Once again, the zoo is open and the animals are running the zoo.
It seems like with the NSA, there's a steady drip of just every day, or
Every
every
day.
couple days there's a new revelation. And
Hey, look, you put a bunch of guys in the room without accountability and they got a bunch of fancy computers that can tap into a lot of things, some abuse is going to happen.
Sure.
And, take a look at a guy like Snowden. Whether you like him or whether you didn't. I mean, how's a guy like that get all that information?
Mm-hmm.
How's one guy like
Right.
that? And how's a guy, at the Navy Yard get to keep a top secret clearance when you got mental issues like that?
Sure.
So, once again, lack of accountability. People just like drones, going to work, doing their little same old thing. When do I get my pension? When do I get out of government and kick back? And that's what you get.
Well, speaking of drones, how do you feel about drones?
Oh, once again, I think drones have a proper place in warfare.
Yeah.
I am always in the mindset to alleviate American casualties and to save our American precious treasure. Okay,
Yeah.
so if a drone can do the job that a soldier can do, I want the drone to do the job. Okay, it may all look good on TV, John Wayne leading the charge up the hill, but people die under those circumstances.
Exactly, yeah.
So if we can use a drone now. That said, once again, I think there's been excesses with the program.
Yeah.
And once again, we've got to have accountability and oversight.
Do you think that, and you're uniquely qualified to speak on this, having served overseas, particularly in the capacity that you did, but do you think that there's a point, and again, this is almost more of a philosophical question, but is there a point where the drones begin to do more harm than good in terms of, this far removed from 9/11, is there a certain point where we begin to look like, to generations of folks now in Afghanistan, for example, who are young enough where they maybe barely remember, in other words, what I'm trying to get at is, do they at a certain point do more harm than good, in that as younger folks come up, they don't understand what's going on. They don't understand why they might know someone who's been killed by a drone. And their perception is that we're the bad guys because this is big bad America coming to kill people with these targeted killings with these drones, and they don't know what the war on terror is. They don't know what the Bush doctrine is, and that Obama, in many ways, in terms of this stuff, has just been really kind of been with the drones in particular, Bush on steroids.
Yep.
Is there a certain point where we got to look at that and go, are we doing more harm than good?
Oh, yeah. Like I say, everything is a balancing act. Okay,
Yeah.
the NSA is a balancing act. The use of drones is a balancing act, and you got to have smart people at the switch. And you're right. You can't take out a village. You can't make mistakes like that. It's high stakes, play is what they're doing with that. So, yeah, I mean, look, there's always going to be bad guys out there. We got to take out the bad guys. Anybody that is a direct threat to this country and our safety is going to be a problem for us.
Right.
But yeah, it's all about balance.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple of minutes left. Gary, where do people go? Where is a good place to go online
Thanks.
to learn more about you and your
Yep.
campaign?
Thanks, Matt. I've got a website, lambertforcongress.com.
Okay.
Also got a Facebook page, Gary Lambert for Congress. Please go there, like it. Everybody likes a like. And I'm also on Twitter, pretty active Twitter.
Are you? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Very active person on Twitter. I think Twitter's great. But my handle there is @GaryLambertNH. But yeah, what I love about Twitter is, I follow who I want to follow.
Yeah.
A lot of news organizations. It's the first thing I look at in the morning. If I
Is
want
it?
to get,
Yeah.
if I want to get a wrap on what's happened overnight, what's going on this morning, just take a look at the Twitter feed. And
Well, plus it's a great way to really communicate very directly with
Yep.
constituents or prospective voters,
Absolutely.
the media, whomever.
and you know what I like about it? I know there was some criticism about we've turned into a soundbite culture, but I got to tell you, you got to really think about it, how to put everything into 140 characters. You
Oh,
got to
yeah.
give it, like Mark Twain said, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. It's easy to write long and just ramble on.
Sure,
But
sure.
when you've got to condense stuff, it makes you think about what you say and what you're going to say.
Right, right. No, that's interesting. That's kind of a unique way to look at it, because I do hear people complain about it and how we exist in this sort of soundbite culture now, which I think there's merit to that argument. But your point makes sense. It does sort of require a certain, I guess it teaches you a certain discipline in terms of how you hone your message and
right.
and really think about what you're saying. So that's interesting. Well, Gary, thank you again. And,
Thank you, Matt.
I do want to remind everybody, of course, too, before we go, that coming very, very soon, drkevinradionetwork.com, where you can hear the radio version of Matt Connarton Unleashed. I have another text. I should see if that's from Dr. Kevin, because he kind of gave me, oh, no, okay. Live television. I just want to make sure I have the information right. But yeah, drkevinradionetwork.com. Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern will be the radio edition of Matt Connarton Unleashed. And, of course, Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern will be the Matt Connarton Show, which will be less political. We'll talk to politicians on that program, but also musicians and artists and really anybody who is doing something interesting and positive to affect change in the world. I want to talk to and get to know those people. So it'll be sort of a more laid-back version of this program. So definitely look for that in the coming weeks, and I will keep you posted to online and on Facebook on what's happening with that. So, and of course, I'll be back today at 4 o'clock with Norm and at 6 o'clock with Gary if you're watching us live. And Gary Lambert, thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you again, Matt. Thanks
And,
for having me.
I love the fact that you're going to introduce that bill
Thank you.
about modernizing the government. That's awesome.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for this week's Matt Connarton Unleashed. So thanks, everybody. I'll talk at you next week.